Khan speaking, project planning and BIM specialist. And today I will show you how to manage our resources in our program. So what is Power Project? Let's talk about it a little bit. It's actually a course scheduling tool which provides you to create a schedule, resource and cost management also in Power Project with the scheduling part. And also with the reportings, you can generate earned value analysis, S-curves, you can perform risk analysis, and also for the line of balance methodology for lean construction, you can also have line of balance charts as well. For the BI reporting, Power Project has direct integration with the BI systems. So therefore, you don't need to actually spend a lot of time to update the progress data and also the actual costs. We have site progress mobile, so the site engineers can directly update the schedule, enter the progress directly from the mobile application. They can add notes, take pictures, and directly affect to the schedule. Power Project also have a free project viewer, so if you're sending the information to whom, they don't have to have any other Power Project license. They can view with the free project viewer. And the last part is for the BIM modeling. Power Project also enables us to use for the BIM planning methodology inside. Let's move to the Power Project interface. You can see that we have a ready schedule here is a sample of two-story housing building. And as an interface of Power Project, I have to mention that we have three major parts, which is the first is the project view. We can actually control our resources, our program, we can control our WBS, as you can see. Once I click the superstructure, you can see that directly the activities related is filtering out. And if I want to go back to the project, I can also click the housing project. For the permanent resources, we can actually will focus on, and also for the consumable resources. Power Project has two main type of resources, which is used for equipments and all the crews, the permanent resources, and the other one, consumable resources, is for actually materials. We have cost centers here to navigate our codes. Code libraries is actually same as the activity codes of P6, but more usual. You can see that I've allocated many codes, and you can see these codes with a more visual manner. And once I click my code, you can see the activities are directly filtering out. And also we have calendars. We can assign the resource calendar or the directly project calendar. And for the progress entry, we need to create progress periods. Okay, so let's focus on our resources. As I said before, we have permanent and the consumable resources. The first one is going to be the permanent resources. In Power Project, we have a library explorer in the view tab. This is actually the same thing is for program files for a Windows-based system. You can see the folders view and every information to use. We need to input first here in Library Explorer. And we can find the permanent resources. You can see that I've already created for my organization a folder, Prime PMO. Once we get into that, we see this is the excavation, which can be an equipment, of course, and also the crews, you can see. The different than other softwares, we can actually initially we can determine the availability of resource units. So for the crews I'm using, and also for the equipments, I'm using the unit amount. So one number of excavator I have, that's why let's say this is excavator, and all the crews, you can see the allocation availability numbers. So maximum number of rebar crew will be number of 6 men. I can initially first determine them, and also you can see that all the coloring I can distinguish between all the crews. These are going to be visible in our Gantt chart and also in our resource histograms. Okay, and once we create a resource, we can directly create by right-clicking and a new permanent resource, so we can directly create these resources. Let's get into a excavator, for example, and we have cost and income rates which are ready on Powerproject. You can see these are in pounds, and initially they are determined as 25 pounds per, I believe this is hourly rate for a crew. But the equipment, this is the weekly 1,000 pounds. And also you can, of course, determine your cost rates. You can change, for example, daily I want to cost this equipment, which is excavator, 500 pounds, for example. Don't worry about the currencies. You can always create your currencies. You can see that the currency unit is here. We can create our currency, for example, USD, and we need to assign an exchange rate to directly Powerproject will calculate your according to your currency. Let's go back to the permanent resources. In the excavator, we've assigned a cost rate for the equipment. And of course, we have modeling types. After the allocation, we can actually determine the how the resources will work in our model. So we see here 5 type of modeling types. For a quick explanation, the non-model type, if we are using non-model type, we know that a allocated resource will work from start and the end date of a activity. So let's directly go our schedule and we see our excavation activities here. I want to allocate a excavator here, and by drag and drop I can directly allocate, let's Ctrl Z, and directly allocate a resource to our activity. If I'm using non-modeled working type, modeling type, I know that excavator, if this activity increases to 15 days, I know that the excavator will work in for 15 days. Directly the effort, which is man hours or machine hours, will calculate it, and also you can see that the allocation number is 1. But let's go to the another type of modeling, which is effort on allocation. This type of modeling mostly used in multiple resource allocation. So that is why I want to focus on foundation slab, and I want to assign some resources on it. So for the foundation slab, as you know that firstly the former crew will start to work, but we need to make sure that we are dropping this resource onto the activity. And other resource will be rebar crew. And for the last part, we will have a concrete crew to complete this activity. But as on the construction site, we know that all the crews doesn't work from the first day to the last day of this activity. That is why we can use effort on allocation modeling type to calculate the resource durations or allocation or the effort parameters. I want to use this duration because I know that this 10-day foundation activity, rebar crew will work approximately 8 days. I know that these last 2 days, they will not going to work. And of course, for the first day of this activity, I know that rebar crew is not going to work. That is why I can actually assign its start and finish date. You can see that the foundation slab starts on 16th, but the rebar crew will start on the 17th. So we can actually determine this duration assignment by effort on allocation model, and directly the man hours will work accordingly, calculated accordingly. So I want to use 5 number of crew, and you can see by the effort on allocation model, and it calculated its resource duration. So I've increased my number of men to 1 to 5 That's why the effort will remain same. You can see that the balancing parameters effort, the effort will remain same, but the duration is changed to 7.2. It dropped actually for 1 day activity. You can of course anytime determine its duration again, and you can right now see that the effort is calculated as 280 man hours. We can always first make sure that this is non-modeled to assign a many number of workers. So you can see that this effort is directly changing because the duration parameter is stable, allocation is increasing, and the effort is increased to 400. You can also see that. And afterwards, I want to calculate this duration. I know that the last day former crew will not work. That is why its man hour dropped to 360 man hours. The last thing is for the concrete crew. Let's assign a non-modeled first to allocate a 3 number of workers. Afterwards, I want to calculate its duration because I know that the concrete crew will only work for concrete pouring. So we can make these changes. This is 8 days, okay, and this activity will be 10 days. So under this 10-day activity, I know that I can actually allocate many crews with the effort on allocation modeling type to determine their man hours differently. And let's go to the right now for histograms. For example, in the view tab we have new histogram tab, and we can add many number of histograms. You can see we can add many number of histograms, and I want to see this former crew, and I want to see their allocation availability and the over allocation units. I will open this legend to navigate initially, and that's why we can see that the availability line is here. Actually, I can allocate 6 number of workers here for the former crew, and I see that this former crew where they are working with the histogram. Allocation number is, you can see with the legend is 5, and they're working from the first day to the last day with the 5-man daily on the activity. If we had over allocation, our project directly should say that we've allocated many number of resources that we actually have. I've allocated 7 number of formwork, and you can see that 1 number of men is over allocated. Power project directly calculates this calculation as well to me. Other thing is consumable resources. So we've actually allocated here a permanent resources, but these crews actually use materials as well. And you can see that in the consumable resources folder, I can create my materials which I want to use, and directly we can assign their units. So if we don't know actually from the initial of the project, we can of course leave these availability, and once the quantities are known, we can directly customize the availability of the quantities. So for the formwork, quantity units should be of course meters square, and for the concrete, for example, it should be meter cubes, and for the reinforcing bar it is going to be tons. So that's why we need to allocate this availability initially for related materials. And let's go into the resourcing bar, and we have right now we need to assign a cost and income rate. So this can be a cost per use. For example, if I use 10 number of resourcing bar, automatically the cost will be according to this, but I want to use per unit. So I've allocated 10 tons. I have 10 tons in my depot, and I want to say to the software that per ton it will be 700 pounds. So this calculation directly will affect my schedule once we start to assign our reinforcing bars. Okay, so please ask your questions, and after this demonstration I will try to answer them. And I want to assign reinforcing bar. By drag and dropping, I'm assigning, and you see that the over allocation warning is come out of on the view because it allocated me 80 tons, which is not true. But if I know that I'm using 2 tons for the foundation activity of this single housing project, and I can directly go to the modeling type. So non-modeled is the same. You can see that from the start and the end date of the activity, this allocation will be used with the daily 200 kilograms per day. You can see, of course, in the nonlinear allocation. And I can right now assign quantity on allocation. So of course I've allocated 2 tons, but we can change it to, for example, 5 tons for the foundation slab activity. And right now we need to assign a consumption rate. And we can assign, for example, daily time units per unit. So daily, it will automatically calculate it that 2 tons per day in order to get 800 duration, which is not true because this is 10-day activity. That is why I will input, for example, 10 days. So it will directly calculate my quantity consumption rate. And I can, of course, allocate this resource to my reinforcing crew. I know that reinforcing crew starts on 16th and ends their activity on the 75th of June. So we can, of course, arrange this thing as well for the material. You can see 25th of June, it will, of course, finish again. And the quantity will be 5 tons. We can, of course, allocate this material as well. Another thing is quantity on allocation or quantity from tasks we used actually for the consumable resources. The quantity on allocation, which if we are using this number of model type, we need to assign a quantity for a material or for the equipment or for the crews. Okay, and this number of input should be on the resource. That is why I double clicked on my resource and I'm inputting this quantity value inside on my resource. But another thing is we can use it for excavator, for example. So we are allocated excavator 15-day activity, and it is non-model type, which is this resource is being used while this activity is in progress. But we can, if we select work on allocation, this time we need to input the quantity of this excavation works into my resource again. So we can determine the number of units to, for example, 2,500 meter cubes of excavation works we have. And you can see that directly the duration increased to enormous number of works because Powerproject calculated hourly work rate is 1 meter cube, which is we need to adjust for time. And daily, if we know that 200 meter cubes we can excavate, you see that 12 days of this activity actually we will going to take. Initially, I have planned 10 days of this activity, but afterwards, after using the model with the quantity, you can see that the 12 days of this activity is going to be taken. And the last model is modeling type for the quantity is the work from task. So this time, except for inputting the quantity value to the resource, we need to input to our activity. So, and that is why adding a task work column, you can see that with the add columns, task work, we can input excavation quantity to the excavation activity, not the resource. So let's assume different than the previous, we can input 3000 meter cube. Powerproject directly took this amount of input to use its resource modeling, because modeling type was work from task, and this task quantity directly taken into the calculation of this quantity. And you can see that this is, instead of 12 days, it will take 15 days of this activity to complete with the same work rates, daily 200 meter cubes per day, in order to finish 3000 meter cube of this excavation work. And the last thing I will going to show you is that on the resource charts, you can see that we can add many number of resource charts. So I want to see my excavator, for example. So this excavator is working here. If we go up a little bit, this excavation activity, our excavator is here working. Let's open its legends, and we can see that we can change this one to rebar as well, and directly Powerproject will going to show you where your resource crews are working with the how many number of men. And you can see that from the first day and the last day of this resource rebar crew is working same number of men. So initially the 5 number, and the last day 5 number of men working, and this is actually linear allocation. We can, if we want to use different resource curve in our resource for the use of resource leveling, we can determine many number of resource curves. For example, if I select the triangular curve, you can see that some over allocation has been shown on the screen. That is why, according to the triangular resource curve, you can see that from the first day it is increasing to the middle of this activity, and at the peak point it increases the number of allocation to 9. That is why I need to, if I'm going to use this resource curve, I need to go to my resource crew and increase my number of, decrease my number of allocation to, for example, to 3, let's say. If we input 3 number of allocation averagely, of course, for this distribution, we will not have any over allocation. Let's open our resource curve again, and you can see that at the peak point it is right now 5.4 number of men working, and that is why actually we need to make sure that 5 number of men at least working at the specific date between 24th and the 25th of this resource. So these are the, actually for the non-linear allocation, we can determine the resource usage with the resource curves. So let's say I will want to use the backloaded formwork activity, and you can see that approximately to the 50% of this resource usage, you can see that about 3 men working of this formwork activity, and after the 50% of the resource usage, you can see that the 6 number of men is working. Actually, it is over allocated 6.5. That is why I need to if I'm going to use this type of nonlinear allocation, I need to decrease former crew's allocation number to, for example, to 4. You can see right now that the over allocation is this. So these are the resource histograms actually for making an accurate estimation for resource usage to finish our project. The other thing is actually we can use our line of balance charts to determine our crew flow to make sure that all the resources, so we can see all the resources allocated in the activities, to make sure that every crew, once they finish their work in one location, we can make sure that their waiting times is eliminated or minimized. So to understand this type of analysis, we can see that we need to first reschedule our program to make sure that, because all the changes are of the durations are changed. Okay. And once the excavation works, we see that the piles and the footings activities are starting. With the finish to start activity, they are actually 5-day activities. Okay. And you can see this change with a bit gap here between the start of these two activities, but we can use the same approach as the start with the lag activity to make sure that they don't collapse in same location, but we can determine this flow, that we can make sure that all the crews are following their predecessors and successors with a more lean way. So you can see that this floor and structural column walls, we know that the rebar former concrete crew are working, and you can see that their slab work need to start here on 23rd of July, and approximately 2 weeks they are waiting this activity to start, which is not really effective solution. That is why I'm making sure that once the columns are finished, the pour of concrete, for example, and in 9th of July, I'm making sure that 10th of July, this slab work will going to start. Again, for the second floor, once this macrostructure works finishes on the first floor, why we should wait 1, 2, and 2.5 approximately weeks to start structural columns. That is why I'm making sure that all the working crews are following its predecessor and the successors. So once the slab work is finishes, of course, there's going to be some lag between, but not more than 3 or 5 days. And once the roofing finishes, I want to make sure that I will start to construct our interior works to make sure that I'm going to finish this construction project. Really, for example, you can see that this last activity is 14th of December 2020, but we can, with this line of balance chart, we can make sure that these resources are not collapsing, but they are following with the most effective way to make sure that we can finish this project much earlier. So you can see that approximately 1 month earlier, I'm able to finish if I follow this schedule. The project I can finish 1 month earlier. Okay, so this was the last thing for the lean construction, because once we start to examine the resources, we need to, of course, consider our wastes. And directly in the Power Project, you can see in the Power Project tab, we have resource reports. Directly you can get resource reports. So to Excel, let's say, we have allocated some resources to excavation activity. You can see one excavator is working, its man hours here, and the quantity it's using is also, we can see and track those. And for the overall percent complete, once the activities are start to finishing, the progress is entering. This percentages will be on the screen as well. And for the foundation slab activity, you can see that the many crews we allocated also can be exported to Excel.